I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman for Georgia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, how is it that we here in Congress, in the face of all the domestic and international crises that we are facing right now, that we're here talking about decriminalizing and descheduling marijuana? Now, we're all going to go home this weekend. And what are our constituents going to be talking about? They're going to be talking about the price of gas. They're going to be talking about the price of food. They're going to be talking about the price that they have to pay to heat their homes. They're going to turn on the TV, and what are they going to see? They're going to see in real time Ukrainians being bombed by Russia, fleeing for their life. And what are we doing here in Congress? Talking about marijuana? You got to be kidding me. Mr. Speaker, as you know, I'm a pharmacist. I know addiction. I know, and I've studied addiction. I can tell you, marijuana is nothing more than a gateway drug. It leads to other harder drugs. Don't try to justify this by saying, oh, alcohol is a drug and it's legalized. That's not what we do. That makes no sense whatsoever. Mr. Speaker, we had a hearing in the Energy and Commerce Committee. We had 10 parents before us whose children had died due to opioid addiction. Not 8 out of 10, not 9 out of 10, but 10 out of 10 of those parents said they smoked marijuana to begin with. 10 out of 10. It is a gateway drug that leads to harder drugs. This is not a Republican Democrat situation here. This is an American problem. You know that we had 100,000 Americans die of overdose last year. Mr. Speaker, this is misguided. This is wrong. This is not what we should be discussing.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was a clip from one of our esteemed representatives in the House of Representatives from Georgia, our Buddy Carter. This was not from 1984. This was not from 1974. This was not from 2004. This is over the weekend. And that clip, that impassioned speech about the impacts of marijuana being a gateway drug was heard on the House floor just prior to the vote on the MORE Act. We've got a lot to say about this. We've got an awful lot to say about this. And with that, I'd like to welcome you into the rotation, and I'm going to hand it right over to Mr. Brian Jones.
Yeah, Patrick, a lot to unpack here. So this clip, there was a 14-second clip that went around Twitter, went around the cannabis space, I would say, where it was where he said he was a pharmacist. The point there, he says he's a pharmacist and there's nothing more than a gateway drug. We showed you the whole 2-minute clip because I think it was important for everybody to hear what he said completely, because that shorter clip wasn't even the most asinine thing he said. But we talked about this last week. We had the emergency news sesh, and we talked about the fact that Nadler was going to be bringing the MORE Act back, and he's not alone in it. There's a few other representatives that are involved in writing the bill, but it's the same bill that's passed here and gone nowhere. So after I saw the Buddy Carter thing, I felt a big need to watch the whole hour-long debate that happened. So we'll get to that, but let's unpack what Buddy says. I'm going to go through what I think is the most egregious statements. One, obviously, when he brings up the pharmacy part, I just shake my head. All right, that's drugs. Are we hurting your bottom line, buddy? Sorry about that. Alcohol's a drug. He says that's not what we do. We don't compare the two. Well, why not? He quickly goes into opioids. It has nothing to do with cannabis, but he's going on his gateway pathway. So that's I get what he's trying to say. But then
Brian does it. I mean, this guy's a pharmacist. He was complicit in the prescription of.
Yeah, we could
God knows
definitely
how many
go down
pills.
that one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I think the most asinine thing he said was the 100,000 people who die of opioid, or not opioids, it's just drug addiction, a drug overdose. Well, buddy, can we talk about the 100,000 people who die of alcohol-related traffic accidents a year? And that's just traffic accidents. That doesn't get into the long-term effects of cirrhosis and heart disease of what alcohol might cause.
We don't do that, Brian.
We don't do that.
We don't do that.
We don't compare alcohol, so we won't, because alcohol is so much fucking worse. And that speech drove me nuts. So, anything you want to talk about in the four things that I kind of went down there?
As I listened to it, he's not wrong. There's a lot going on in the world. There is a lot. I mean, there's pressures all over the place. We've injected trillions of dollars into the economy, and that's going to do a screeching halt right now. And there's going to be problems facing the American people. Inflation's a real issue. Those things need to be addressed. But the fact of the matter is, you weren't elected to address one thing. You weren't elected to address two things. You were elected in totality to shape the future of the country and deal with the issues of the day. And certainly cannabis legalization or marijuana legalization is an issue of the day. So the debate is real. The debate needs to be had. And your state has legalized marijuana in some capacity. So the debate needs to be had in what capacity and how we're going to move this thing forward. We've said it before. It's a death by 1,000 cuts. And the passage of the MORE Act is just one more thing that's going to keep going. And the MORE Act, is to a certain degree a political tool. The vote, I think, was right down party lines. I think 2 Republicans actually voted in favor of it.
Yep.
But if you look at the cannabis caucus, you've got who's the young lady from South Carolina?
Nancy Mace.
She's got her own bill, right? So she's got her own agenda. She's a Republican that sits on the National Cannabis Caucus in Congress, but voted no for the MORE Act because she's got her own bill that she wants to see put through. So I mean, it's very transparent if you pay even a little bit of attention to what's going on. So yes, there's other stuff going on, but no, sir, this is not an irrelevant topic by any stretch.
I said I wasn't going to participate, but just sitting off camera on the production side, I mean, this is just so far out of touch with what people want. And if you want an illustration of what the government wants or the powers that be wants versus what the people want, look no further. Of course, no one wants war in Ukraine. No one wants conflict anywhere. But you know what? People want jobs. They want revenue. They want infrastructure. We're talking about impeding the progress of a new industry that, quite frankly, can provide a lot of things for a lot of people in this country at home. Forget Ukraine. It's a distraction. It's a horrible thing. It has nothing to do with the 99% of the taxpaying population in the United States. But being able to get a job, maybe being able to get healthcare, being able to get a 401k through legalized marijuana business, that's important. And hey, man, if you're going to get in the way, get the fuck out of the way, man. That's it.
You're just you brought up a great point. There's 500,000 people in the United States right now that are employed in the cannabis industry. Mm-hmm. Some of those folks can't get a mortgage. Some of those folks can't save for retirement. And moving the ball forward, and I'm just perusing an article, Nancy Mace is speaking at the Bazinga conference.
Yeah,
Brian, what's the Bazinga conference?
The big, well, as far as I know, it's a capital raising conference, but it's mostly just a bunch of marijuana companies that, and now it's going to include some psychedelics too, I think, in Miami, Florida on 420. No irony there, I'm sure, but a pretty big deal. And there's 2 big cannabis conferences, right? You have MJ BizCon and you have this one. These are the 2 big ones. One's a little bit more people, one's a little bit more capital. And a lot of money's moved to South Florida. But I want to get back to here because he said something else, and I want to get really on the gateway drug part, because I don't think Americans are that dumb to think that cannabis is the only reason someone goes from zero to alcohol to cannabis to heroin or to any opioid or to fentanyl. And if you go through, I listened to the whole hour, it was mind-numbing. Every Republican in their first, 10 sentences talked about all the crises that the America's facing and the world's facing, and we're talking about cannabis. Are you kidding me? Yeah, because it's freaking relevant. It's been relevant for the last 3 years. This thing's been on the House 4 other times, I think. The SAFE Act, this is relevant. This is what's going on in the country. People are voting on this. More states are voting on this. So it's very fucking relevant. And it drives me nuts that he's sitting there saying, oh, it's a gateway drug and this and that. Those people who do that are going to do it regardless if they ever smoke a joint. That's what they're going to do. They're chasing their next high. It doesn't matter what it is. They're going after the next one. And part of the discussion, the discourse in this was talking about, all the crime that marijuana, leads to. And then they brought up fentanyl, and they're talking about opioids. What the hell are they talking about? Fentanyl. Oh, and here's the other thing. Your kids, even if you're in a state that it doesn't have cannabis that's legal, your kids most likely are going to be buying this from a fucking street dealer. Where would you rather have them buy it? From a regulated and tested industry, or from a street dealer where it could be laced with fentanyl that came across the border, wherever the hell it comes from? The short-sightedness and the political game of this is maddening. And I urge everyone who has a dog in this fight, right, to look at what they talked about, because all the Republicans talked about was the crises and gateway drug and opioid addiction, and how that has anything to do with the medical benefits of cannabis. And then all the Democrats, every one of them, these are talking points. They just went back and forth, knowing this thing's not going anywhere in the Senate, but they got to get a vote on record for the midterms. All the Democrats are talking about social equity and the unfair balance of convictions, right? It was used against Black and brown people. And they're not wrong. They're not wrong, but that's not going to move the day. We've talked to Ian, we've talked to a few others. There's just so many more pieces of this puzzle that have to be put together. And I will credit, Representative Bentz from Oregon. I'm going to talk about him a little bit, because he was there was Nadler on one side and Bentz on the other. And he started off slow. He started talking about Oregon hoop, the hoop houses and the problems out west, California, Oregon, Washington, of illegal grows, and how there's no money for law enforcement. Well, what motherfucker? What are you using all the tax revenue for? You're taxing the shit out of this, right? Where's that money going? You can't put some of your state's coffers into enforcing the illegal trade in your state. You guys voted to legalize it, not the federal government. So that, he pissed me off with that one. But he does bring it back. He says, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. And he's not wrong. If we're going to do it, let's do it right. Banking, social equity programs, and having a fund for people that were, targeted, improperly targeted. So, he brought it back, and he just says, let's do it right. But the other thing, George, and this is the last thing I'll say, because I know I'm rambling now. A thing that you just said was, this is what the people are saying. And they were quoting a 91% number of Americans want some sort of medical or some sort of cannabis reform. That's a real number. So this is very relevant. This is why you're talking about it. So there you go. That's my spiel. Now we can move on.
And it's funny because the debate and the vote actually happened on April Fool's, right? So that all started on April Fool's Day, and there was a lot of internet memes about it. But on the same day that passed, we launched in New Mexico. So recreational sales, adult use sales started in New Mexico. Congratulations to the folks in New Mexico, just to myself. Fantastic start to the selling season down there. I think in the first week, we're already over $4 million in sales in New Mexico. So you talk about being
first weekend, I believe.
First weekend. First
weekend.
Weekend I thought was 2 million. And I mean, listen, you're talking about Friday was 4.1. We're sitting here on 4.5, and then our numbers over $4 million.
Do you see the article about them thinking they didn't have enough for the towns on the border because of all the Texans that are going across?
Oh yeah, they're all there. Funny, right? You know what? New Mexico's got a border problem, and it's not coming from Mexico. No. It's coming from El Paso, and it's
for their cannabis. They do.
Yeah. Well, it's just a new kind of border crisis down there.
I do. Before we move on, I know we're going to talk about Nancy next. I do want to credit Steny Hoyer. Now, I don't know a lot of these representatives because I don't live in their states, but Representative Biggs, Representative. Let me pick. Give me a sec, because Palazzo. Okay, that's Arizona and Mississippi, both two states that want it. But boy, did they have impassioned pleas against this bill, and they were so worried about everything else but it. But Steny Hoyer, old white dude, he's a Democrat from Maryland. He's basically said, "Yeah, you know what, buddy? I believed it was a gateway drug at one time too, but I was wrong." So I will credit him for that. But then, you're right. Let's move on to Nancy, because you brought that up, that she has a bill of her own. I'll let you take it.
Yeah, so it's interesting. She's got a bill of her own, and it really kind of kicks everything down to the state's level and says, "Hey, we're going to completely stay out of this. It's a version of safe banking, but without social equity and without expungement." And I want to get past the misnomer of social equity, because in our world, in our industry, we're starting to see some litigation around social equity. And we're starting to see where states that think they're doing the right thing have really just propped up fronting companies. So a social equity applicant, and this person, and you put them in front of everything, and you backdoor with the capital, and you take a 75% equity stake in the license. Social equity is not real. The social equity component of a lot of these bills are not real, and we're starting to see litigation and criminal action actually be brought against the people that are applying for these licenses. So the front man is actually getting in trouble because of the money that's there. Safe banking has to happen. Some reform there has to happen to give social equity applicants a fair shot at raising capital. Ian talked about it, and the more and more we get into this, it's done backwards. They don't have access to cheap money, and money's super cheap for everybody. It's everywhere. There's so much cash out there. George popped back behind the screen, and he'll tell you that it's drying up really, really quickly. And again, different issue, different topic, but there's a ton of capital out there waiting to be dispersed, but it's in limited pockets, and it's super expensive. So social equity applicants right now, and that portion of the bill, it's not real. So anybody that's pushing that envelope isn't doing it in a meaningful way unless you set the foundation for it to work. The second part of it, of the MORE Act, and I think the E, is expungement. If you look in, was it South Dakota? And for those of you who are real listeners to $5 Buzz and to this program, know that I have no idea what geography is. In South Dakota, Governor Nome.
It's very close to you, by the way. In Colorado there.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's my next door neighbor. Just rejected a bill that had passed through their legislature that included expungement. She said, "Nah, it's not a thing." And after our conversation with Michael Diaz-Rivera, I've come around on what expungement means and where it needs to sit. I have a different view. I was anti-expungement for a long time. You break the law, you break the law. You did it knowingly, you did it knowingly. But we are.
But as we've heard in
this week,
yeah, the law is not applied fairly.
It's not.
So,
it's not spread evenly, right? It's not peanut butter. It's certainly done in chunks. And so, with what we're looking at from Congresswoman Mace, and what she wants to do, I think makes a lot of sense. Pushing things into the states and letting them do what they want to do, but don't be fooled by some of the applications of these things, right? So social equity, expungement, those things aren't necessarily exactly the altruistic application that they might seem to be in the bill. I think it's a little bit different.
We have been told, medicinal first. Pretty much every state that's gone rec has gone medicinal first. I think California had it for 17 or 20 years. We are told, social equity is a reason that we need to do this. We need to make it right. I go to Nancy's bill, Representative Mace's bill, and I say, all right, you're going to give it back to the states. Well, we know that there's numerous banking regulations and that need to be passed as well. So where's that? That needs to be part of it. Any bill, MORE Act, SR, I think hers is called the SRA.
States Act, right? Isn't that what
States Reformed Act is what she's saying. And listen, to be fair, and so everybody knows this, I have not read any of these bills cover to cover. I read the Booker bill summary. It was a 30-page summary. I tried reading the, I don't know, there's no fucking way these senators are reading these things. There's just no way. They have people telling them what's in there. Plus,
Isn't Miss
they don't read them
Pelosi
anyways.
famous for saying we got to pass the bill to know what's in it?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But anyways, so I don't know, but it's all going to need some, a much more extensive banking and financial regulation system than the one we have now. Instead of the ATF, you're probably going to need to add a C to that, right? You're going to have something that, alcohol, tobacco, firearms. Well, cannabis probably should be in there. There's just so much more that needs to be in this bill. And these guys and girls in this house are truly just they're not worried about it. They're right. Like the Republicans are saying we're worried about it. No, you're not. Because if you were serious about it, you'd put together a bill that made fucking sense. This one doesn't make sense for everybody involved. It makes sense for the Democrats and checking a box for when they go home and look for those dollars for their next election. And it makes sense for the Republicans, for whatever hell reason they're saying, but it doesn't really make sense for the people. And that's the frustrating part. But, I like Nancy's Representative Mace's. I keep calling her Nancy like I fucking know her. I don't. I like her approach because it's more power to the states. You still got to worry about the dormant commerce clause. You still have to worry about, that'll bring in interstate, right?
I talk about the dormant commerce clause.
Okay, I know very little about it, but it was something to put in place years ago that basically wouldn't allow states. It allows competition. It allows competition, so it allows competition across state borders. Right now, the way if there is no application of it, it'll just be the same sort of silo, and it doesn't really fix the problem of everybody wants to grow their weed in a certain state because it's cheaper and it's more, the weather's better, whatever. Nobody wants to grow weed in Florida. They have to because it has to be, seed to sale. But I'm not sure these states are going to let control of this go. I just don't see it happening. So anybody planning for that to be put into place, we'll see.
Now, if it stays state by state, the way that it is and rolls out now, I think you leave the power in the states and nobody's going to let it go. And the more states that come online, I'm starting to turn you and I have had a conversation around 26, right? The magic number is 26. I don't believe that anymore. I don't believe it's higher than that either.
You don't think it's a number at all?
I don't think there's a number anymore. I actually think that it's problematic the more states that come online, because the more states that come online, if you have a grow facility and you can create property taxes on a $50 million bill, if you've got all of the commerce in your state, why are you going to allow, if you're sitting in Colorado, why are you going to allow trade into Utah? Why are you going to allow trade in Nebraska? Why are you going to let that happen or come into your state where you don't necessarily have, the seed to sale, the vertical integration that we've come to know as it's been state by state, because it's generating revenue, it's generating jobs. It's actually good for the states for this to be siloed and maintain the way that it is now. It's good for the state, and it's good for the feds. Right, the 280E issue that we've discussed at length is good for the feds. So if it rolls out on a state-by-state basis and we get banking, I don't know that there's ever going to be a need for federal legalization, because if you get access to capital, if you get access to banking, and if you have the ability to build infrastructure on a state-by-state basis, clearly we don't need Washington for much. Right, the government was built for, or as George likes to say, .gov was built for a very specific reason: to provide for the common defense. Build your army, stay the fuck out of my backyard.
Yeah.
Right. I that's where I'm starting to get to on this. And so federal legalization, I don't think it matters if you get states' rights done correctly.
Yeah. That's a great point. And that would probably be the best for because you're right. If something were to pass federally, dormant commerce, interstate, all opens up, it certainly is going to save people money. Right. It's going to save people money, not businesses. I'm talking people buying the product. But I'm not, it's big tax revenues on big dollars. So it's a tough balance, as we talk about it here. Like, you can kind of see why they're fighting for it, but that doesn't make it right. Fighting against it, I mean, that's what doesn't make it right.
Now, what we do need is what's happening in Canada. We do need the ability for a pot shop or dispensary to open in an airport, because it is so much better to fly high than drunk. It's so much better. But that's starting to, we joke a little bit, but we're starting to see that proliferation up north. And again, the federal legalization. Listen, I don't have to wear a mask to go to the grocery store, but I got to wear it to fly to New York. Why? Because the feds are telling me so. So I'm never going to be able to buy a joint, next to Hudson News and DIA as long as the feds are doing what they do. That's just the
True.
thing.
It does limit access for sure. It does
But
limit
does it?
access.
I mean, does it?
No,
I mean, I'm not.
no,
Does it?
no.
It
And
doesn't.
one of our next most nearest to this date, this release, our next guest is going to talk about home grows. So it'll be interesting about the access part because you can do it yourself in a lot of these states. So I think we beat the drum on this one? I mean, we could go through. There's been a few more articles about Lindsey Graham saying he's okay with medical, and how another senator, I believe, said that they were thinking about adding this to the 2023 Farm Bill, like they did hemp.
But that still hasn't gotten FDA approval, so it's nowhere.
I know.
So
There's
when was the
regulations
Farm Bill
around it.
passed?
18.
And what year is it?
It is 2022, I believe. Yeah.
Good fucking luck, guys.
Yeah.
Right. That's Washington for you.
Yeah.
And we will continue. Listen, we will continue to beat the drum. But I think the passage of the MORE Act is an important milestone. It's not going to go anywhere.
Let's talk about the positive.
We can agree on that. The passage is a milestone. It's a big deal. It's not going to go anywhere. We can agree on that. But I do think that as we continue to see these things, these conversations happen, all of it is good. The results are bad, but I think that pointing out our buddy who is still saying that, hey, I'm big pharma and this is bad for us because we don't have a stake, we don't have a share in that, we don't have a dog in the fight. So no. I mean, you still see that mentality for all of us, and I think we probably have a limited audience. Right, we've got an algorithm that punches out content to those who want to find it, and so we are only seeing a lot of the stuff and a lot of the messaging that we want to see. MORE Act passed, safe banking is coming, all these things. We want to present you with the other side of the argument, and also we want to get these folks on. Buddy, you're welcome to come on.
I would love to hear. I know what parents go to. They try to find a reason why something happened. I mean, if it happened to my kid, it'd be like, what did I do wrong? What happened? What went wrong? Because of what Buddy referenced there. I get it. But a regulated, clean market is safer. It's safer for cannabis, right? And you know what? I will never buy that it's any more of a gateway drug than alcohol. I'll never buy it.
How many times have you shot up, Brian?
Huh?
How many times have you shot up?
I haven't gone past the cannabis stage, and I never will. I don't give a shit to, but
yeah, it's not of interest. And we've been on $5 Buzz, and we know some guys that are involved in psychedelics, and it's all natural, and that's fine, and that's their jam, and that's cool. Not mine.
Me either.
I enjoy cannabis, and that's kind of where I sit. And I know guys that do a lot of other things, and that's more geared towards their personalities and what they're going to do. But they also have limits. People that die of opioid addiction, access is a problem, but personality is also part of the problem.
Yeah, and people were very complicit in that opioid revolution or whatever it did. The number of people that it killed, people knew that was going on, and nobody blinked an eye. Nobody blinked an eye until somebody got caught. And
what is that? That's an endemic, right? I mean, that was a problem that was created. It was a health crisis that was created artificially. Whether or not you believe COVID was created artificially, we can save that for $5 Buzz, I'm sure. A different topic that we don't dive into here. But yeah, it was just an interesting week. I think it was a good week. It certainly elevated the conversation, but it also shed light onto some archaic mindsets that are still out there that still need to be changed. So
yeah, you wonder if they can be. And this, we can maybe finish on this. It is a death by 1,000 cuts. That's a great way to put it. I think that's what George said. It's a death by, it's changing, what was the guy's from Maryland's name? It's changing that guy's mind 1,000,000 times, 100 million times. Steny Hoyer is his name. It's changing guys like Steny Hoyer's minds. Women like Nancy Mace wasn't pro weed growing up. She wasn't, but now she sees the benefits of it. And it's just like what we talked about. I was 20 years old and berating somebody because they brought a dugout in my car. And, maybe it's the best thing that ever happened to me that I didn't try it until I was, mid 30. So, maybe that's why, maybe that's why my mind changed, obviously, because I definitely drank my face off through college and many years after, and did a lot dumber things than I ever would have done, being high. So, yeah, with that, we kind of ended this 2-week sesh of just us. We'll get back to. We promise we'll get back to guests next week. We have numerous coming up. So, Patrick, I'll let you close it out.
Line them up, knock them down. George, we can end the rotation as soon as you hit the glade. So let's get out of here.